The stage lights at Britain's Got Talent had seen thousands of hopeful faces walk out from behind that curtain. But no one, not a single soul in that building, was prepared for what was about to happen that night. The audience shifted in their seats. The judges leaned back, arms crossed, expressions neutral. Simon Cowell tapped his pen against the table, already halfway bored before the act had even started. That was his default. That was always his default. Until tonight. A man walked out onto that stage alone. No band. No backup dancers. No flashy costume. Just a simple white shirt, black trousers, and a nervous smile that barely masked something enormous burning beneath the surface. His name was Miguel Santos, and he had flown thousands of miles from the Philippines to stand in that exact spot. He had spent years dreaming about this moment. Years rehearsing in a tiny room while his family slept. Years pouring every ounce of grief, love, and hope into a voice that the world had never heard. Tonight, all of it came down to the next few minutes. Amanda Holden leaned forward and asked him where he was from. He answered softly, his accent warm and unmistakable. She smiled politely. The audience gave a gentle, almost patronizing round of applause. And then Simon asked the question that cut straight through the small talk. "What are you going to sing for us tonight, Miguel?" Miguel paused. He looked down at the floor for just a second, a single breath between who he was and who he was about to become, and then he looked back up and said, "I am going to sing a tribute to the king." The room went quiet. A few audience members exchanged glances. Someone in the back row whispered something to their partner. And then the music started. The opening notes drifted out across the stage, slow, golden, unmistakable. It was Elvis. But the moment Miguel opened his mouth, everything changed. The sound that came out of this quiet, humble Filipino man was nothing short of supernatural. Rich. Aching. Thunderous. It rolled across the auditorium like a warm wave and hit every single person in that room square in the chest. The audience gasped audibly. Heads snapped up. Phones flew into the air. In the front rows, people grabbed each other's arms without even realizing it. Simon Cowell stopped tapping his pen. He sat completely still, which for Simon is rarer than any golden buzzer. His eyes, usually skeptical and half-lidded, were wide open now. He wasn't performing surprise. He wasn't playing to the cameras. He was genuinely, completely arrested by what he was hearing. Something was happening on that stage that he hadn't felt in years. Something raw. Something real. Miguel's voice climbed higher, and with every note, the story behind it became more visible. Because Miguel hadn't just learned Elvis. He had lived inside that music. He had used it to survive the death of his father, the man who first put a vinyl record on a turntable in their tiny home in Manila and said, "Listen to this, son, this is something magic." Miguel had been 9 years old. His father had been gone by the time he was 15. And every single performance since then had been a way of keeping that connection alive, a way of reaching across time and loss and distance to hold on to the man who taught him that music could save you. The audience didn't know this story yet. But they felt it. That is the extraordinary, almost terrifying power of a voice that carries real pain. You don't need the words. You don't need the explanation. You just feel it and you don't know why and you can't look away. By the second chorus, people were on their feet. Not trickling up one by one, all at once, like a single synchronized exhale. Women were crying openly. Men had their hands pressed over their mouths. A little girl near the front was gripping her mother's jacket and staring at the stage with enormous, unblinking eyes. The camera found Simon again. He was leaning forward now, both elbows on the table, jaw tight, eyes glistening. Not crying. Not yet. But right at the edge of something he didn't have the words for. And then Miguel hit the final note. Long sustained. Flawless. It soared up into the rafters of that theater and hung in the air like something sacred. When it finally faded, there was a single second of absolute silence, that rare, electric silence that only happens when an entire room of people has forgotten how to breathe. Then the place erupted. Simon stood up. Simon Cowell, the man who built a career on saying no, on being unmoved, on being the voice that separated illusion from reality, he stood up and clapped. The rest of the judges were already on their feet, already shouting, already overwhelmed. But Simon's standing ovation hit different. Because everyone in that room knew what it meant. When the noise finally settled enough for the judges to speak, Simon tried to say something. He opened his mouth. He closed it again. He shook his head slowly, and for the first time in perhaps the entire history of that show, Simon Cowell was completely, utterly speechless. He pressed his fingers to his lips. He looked at Miguel with an expression that had nothing to do with judging and everything to do with being human. Then Alicia Dixon reached forward and slammed her hand down on the golden buzzer. The golden confetti exploded from the ceiling in a cascade of light and color. Miguel collapsed to his knees on the stage, hands over his face, his whole body shaking with sobs he had been holding back for 20 years. The audience was standing, screaming, crying alongside him. And somewhere far away, in a small house in Manila, his mother was watching a live stream on a phone with a cracked screen, and she was whispering her husband's name. Simon finally found his voice. He leaned into the microphone and said quietly, simply, "That was one of the most extraordinary things I have ever witnessed on this stage. Miguel Santos, you didn't just sing tonight. You made us feel something we won't forget for the rest of our lives." And he meant every single word.